The Onx Hunt app is a super valuable tool that I use every single time I'm in the field. So in this video, I'm going to talk through my 5 best tips for the Onx Hunt app to help you have a better season this fall. Before we jump in, please like this video. It helps me out a ton with the YouTube algorithm. So tip number 1 is all the ways that you can use the tracker feature in the Onx Hunt app. The tracking feature simply lays a line everywhere you walk as you have it running in the app. I use this anytime I'm scouting in the field to see exactly what parts of a property I have been and what parts I have not yet. Another thing that I use it for a lot is when I'm checking out a new piece of public land, I will use the tracker as I'm driving around in my truck. That way, the next time I'm out there, I know exactly where I have been and where I've yet to lay eyes. Another super underrated use for the tracker feature is accessing your stand. If I'm going into a piece on public or even here on private land, I will run the tracker as I'm accessing in the daylight. That way I can follow that exact path in the dark and get back to my truck. I will also use it if I'm off-season scouting and find an area I want to hunt. I will mark a specific tree, go to that tree, start the tracker, and then walk back to my truck. That way I know I have a direct route that's free from any debris or fallen trees. I don't have to cross anything wild and can get exactly from point A to point B as efficiently and as quietly as possible. Another thing I'll do while I'm scouting, if I find a really good buck bed that looks like it's going to be used during season, is I'll actually drop a pin right into that buck bed, and then I'll start my tracker while I'm standing on it and follow all of his exit trails out of that bed. So I'll only run the tracker while I'm actively on one of those trails, and what you end up with is basically a spider web of trails out of that buck bed that I can go back to and say, okay, I'm gonna set up on that bed. This is the wind direction. Where do I think I can set up in a tree? And I'll be able to have every one of those trails mapped out and know exactly where to set up. The last 2 uses are probably a little bit more obvious. I always use the tracker when I'm blood trailing, so I know exactly where last blood is, where I've covered, where I've not covered. It's especially helpful if you get into a grid search situation, which if you end up bow hunting long enough, you're probably going to end up having a grid search for a deer or two. So it's really helpful to see exactly where you've been. And same thing goes for shed hunting. Shed hunting comes down to covering as much ground as possible. By tracking where you've walked, you know exactly where you've been and where you haven't been. So tip number 1 is using the tracker app. Compass mode is second nature to me, but I've learned that a lot of people have no clue that it even exists. So in compass mode, you're going to hit the crosshairs in the bottom right corner, and it's going to center the view of the app on your exact position. Now, if you hit the compass on there again, you're going to see a blue triangle, and it's going to show you exactly which way you're facing. So a lot of times I'll have a destination mark, whether it's a food source back in the timber, or if I want to get back to my truck, I'll have a pin dropped of where I want to end up. So I'll hit that compass mode to be able to see exactly which way my phone is facing, and it's going to change as I turn my phone, so I need to know exactly what my bearing is to get back to my location. So super useful. I use it all the time. The other thing that you can do is if you hit that compass again, once you already see that blue triangle, is it's going to show the distance. So as you zoom in and zoom out, it's going to show you the exact distance of what is on the screen of your phone. So if I want to get back to my truck again, I can hit that compass mode, hit it again, and it's going to show the distance, and I can see that my truck is at 700 yards. That way you have a ballpark idea of just how far you have to go to get from where you are to your destination. The last use in compass mode is the rangefinder tool, and you'll see a rangefinder icon. If you hit that, you're going to be able to see exact distances along that line. So that way if you forget your rangefinder, if you break your rangefinder, you don't have a rangefinder, you can still pick out landmarks on the map and say, okay, that tree is at 30 yards. So anything inside of that tree is my top pin on my bow, or something along those lines. So that way you can start to determine exact distances to make you more accurate and more lethal in the field. Tip number 3 is to use the 2-finger tool. And this is something I use a lot, and it's super handy and super fast. I went on a hunt last fall with a lot of big name hunters, and most of them had no clue how to even do this. But the 2-finger tool basically allows you to press 2 fingers anywhere on the map, and it's going to show you the distance between both of those points. So this is helpful if I'm hiking in and I want to know how far from a buck bed that I need to set up. I can press down both of those points and figure out, okay, the tree that I had picked out is approximately 90 yards from where I'm anticipating that bedded buck to be. It's super helpful for quick distance checks like that. It's also helpful if I'm trying to figure out if I can shoot all the way across the field with my muzzleloader. You know, I think it might be 200 yards across the field, but when I actually check the distance using my 2 fingers, it ends up to be 300 yards and pushes out of muzzleloader range for myself. So it's a super quick, super easy feature in the Onx Hunt I find myself using a lot. Tip number 4 is to use the exaggerated 3D maps. If you're anything like me, you struggle sometimes to read topo maps, and especially if you're in hilly terrain, you can just toggle on that 3D mode, crank up the exaggeration, and it's going to show you a 3D view of exactly what the terrain looks like. It's really going to exaggerate it to make it super visual for you. If you're like me and struggle sometimes with that, you're going to have a lot better idea of just how the terrain lies. It's also going to help show subtle features like a bench along a hillside or a low spot that you might not be able to see otherwise on the map. This is also helpful in areas that have flatter terrain, that the features are a lot less obvious. When you crank up that exaggeration on the 3D map tool, you start to see little bowls in the ground or little ridge tops that, again, looking at just a typical topo map might not stick out to you as obvious. So tip number 4, use that 3D exaggeration tool. Tip number 5 is to use custom waypoints. When you drop a waypoint, you can actually change the color, the icon, you can name it, you can leave notes, and you can drop a photo in there so you can see exactly what that pin is. And this is something that is extremely helpful in a number of different applications. One of which, if I'm hiking and doing some off-season scouting and I find a tree that I want to hunt later in the year, a lot of times I don't get back to that tree until it's actually time to hunt. So I will drop in, mark it kill tree, put an icon of a tree stand or just a tree. I will take a picture of the tree and actually save that into the waypoint so I know exactly how I'm going to have to set up, how high I'm going to need to be when I get there, and I'll write some notes. What wind it's best for, what the best access is, and then I'll actually use the tracker tool to go out so I have a trail mark to get exactly back to that tree. I'll also use it if I find a nice buck bed. I'll take a picture of that buck bed. I'll drop a waypoint so I can tell exactly on the map where that buck bed is. I'll take the picture so I can see kind of what he's facing, what he can see. So if I'm trying to sneak in and set up as close as possible, I have a ballpark idea of just how far he might be able to see. I'll drop in notes as far as how used it is, what time of the season I think it's getting used the most. As far as the colors go, people get super creative with how they use them and what system they use to mark their waypoints. For me, I typically mark old sign or sign that I'm not super interested anymore in red. I mark exciting sign that's actively being used, things that I definitely would give the thumbs up to hunting. I put that in green. If it's something I just want to check out, sometimes I'll pick a color like white or purple as just something I identified on the map that I might want to visit at a later time. So there's a lot of different things you can do with color, but find what works best for you, and that way you have a super organized view of all the scouting you've done, all of the hunting you've done. A lot of guys think that they can memorize what a property looks like, everything that they found during a day, but you mark enough stuff on your phone and it starts to run together. So it's super helpful to be able to go back in the evening before you're hunting in the morning, look at the map, scroll around, have all of your waypoints organized, be able to make a game plan in and execute on the hunt, and that's how you're going to kill big bucks. If you guys like this kind of information, make sure you subscribe to my channel. I have a ton of content just like this rolling out now until season. But if you really want to improve your scouting skills, check out these videos right here. Thank you guys for watching though. I will see you in the next video.